Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video I have a Retribution Paladin guide for Mythic Plus dungeons. This will be the first one of these I've ever done for Mythic Plus. I'm having a lot of fun in M Plus here in 9.2, and if there's ever time for me to do one, it would be now. So for a majority of the video, I will be talking in terms of that you have at least your 2-set bonus, if not your 4-set bonus. So for the majority of the time, I will be talking in that way. But when I talk about talents and stuff, I will mention the difference, in talents if you don't have any set bonuses. Which many people, if you don't do rating, you're probably waiting for the creation catalyst and stuff to come live. So completely understandable there. So let's go through. Let's just start with talents. Talents for Retribution Paladin Mythic Plus. For Covenant, we're going to focus on Kyrian here. I do not doubt that Necrolord will be a playable Ret Paladin thing at some point, as people are experimenting with doing more things. I'm sure there's some people that already are. It has the strongest AoE Soulbind, for example, in Necrolord, and it was already good in last patch as well. So I don't doubt that Necrolord can be good as well, but we're going to focus on Kyrian. Another interesting thing is Night Fae can also be good if you are buffing one of the broken classes right now, like a Hunter or a Warlock or something like that. Or heck, a Bear Druid with his 4-piece. Although I think that just got nerfed shortly before I'm recording this video. But you can buff somebody else as a Ret Paladin and still, do mediocre damage, but, heavily buff somebody who's broken. So that is an option as well, although, not the best option, I would say, because I think that, it'd be better for the Night Fae to be a tanker healer than to be one of the damage dealers, but it is an option. Venthyr, pretty much not super useful for Ret in Mythic Plus, because it's the Ashen Hollow is great for AoE, and then everything else about it is single target. So let's go ahead and start with talents again, coming from a Kyrian standpoint here for this video. If you don't watch my videos normally, I especially for this expansion, right, with Covenants, I do not double dip into Covenants in the same video. It is way too confusing. So this will be from Kyrian perspective. On the first row of talents, we're going to go with Zeal here. Why is that? Well, this is the only talent that's not a single target talent. With the Pelagos 1-minute build of previous patches, some Rets would run Execution Sentence on Tyrannical, for example. Your overall damage wouldn't be great because of that, but Zeal overall is going to be your best bet here. It also is the best once you have the 2-set or whatever. But regardless, Zeal, if you're just trying to do max damage, you want to go with Zeal in the first row. In the second row, this is where there is a difference. If you're just going for max damage in a dungeon, then you want to go with Empyrean Power for your talent here. Now, this is assuming that you're running Divine Tempest Legendary. Hopefully you have 2 legendaries. I'm going to assume you do, because at some point during this patch you will. So this is assuming you're running Divine Tempest. We'll talk about legendaries next. Blade of Wrath is going to be the best. As soon as you get a 2-set bonus, doesn't matter if you have 2-set or 4-set, Blade of Wrath is going to be what you want to use here to get more procs of your Seraphim. But before that, so if you're waiting for the Creation Catalyst or whatever, you can use Empyrean Power in the second row. In the third row, normally we would skip this row, but for Mythic Plus, it can be useful. I like to run Blinding Light here. It's an AoE stun for an emergency. Not an AoE stun, but an AoE interrupt. For all intents and purposes, if 3 things are casting, it'll stop them from casting for 1 moment before they take non-holy damage from the rest of the group and continue to cast. But it can be a nice break in case of emergency thing. Fist of Justice is also good, just because it allows you to lock down one target by yourself in many ways, by stunning, interrupting, and then your stun coming up very quickly once again. In the next row, it doesn't matter too much here. Unbreakable Spirit is going to be probably the best thing to run, because you're not going to really need Cavalier necessarily in there, and hopefully not Eye for an Eye. You can run that, but hopefully you're not taking melee damage in a high enough key that's just going to kill you. But Unbreakable Spirit is probably the best one here. In the next row, so if you do not have your 2-set or 4-set, you can run Seraphim here. You can run Seraphim here no matter what if you want. It's pretty close either way. But Divine Purpose is also useful here. Divine Purpose is also just like much easier to play. If your pugging keys, especially, timings for things can be really awful for you, right? If you don't have a team that you're playing with. So Seraphim casts can go to waste. Seraphim casts can be completely screwed up. So Divine Purpose is not just a bad talent at all in Mythic Plus, just in general. Obviously, for bosses, Seraphim is a little bit better because, especially like Tyrannical Week, right? You're guaranteed you're on the boss. There's no timing issues. You're not, the pull doesn't end prematurely or get screwed up or things pulled out of your AoE or anything like that. You're just fighting a boss. So Seraphim can be really useful for that. I run Divine Purpose, though, just for max damage, also while having a set bonus, which also matters. Next row, it's your choice for the most part. Healing Hands is what I go with. And then the final row, if you're running Divine Purpose, you might as well run Sanctified Wrath with it. They kind of pair well together. Sanctified Wrath is also just better for AoE damage, for extended AoE. So assuming that you're going to get 25 seconds of uptime on your wings, right? So if you're doing a big key or just keys where the DPS isn't overwhelming and all of your pulls where you use wings are going to last 25 seconds, or you're pulling more into the pull to make your, full uptime on your wings, Sanctified Wrath is the way to go here, again, just for most damage, especially with the 2 or 4 set. Without that, you can run Final Reckoning again here. So it'd be very similar, obviously, because the biggest things that changed are legendaries / having 2 legendaries / having set bonuses. So it makes sense that you could run a similar build to previous patches if you don't have a set bonus. So that'd be Seraphim Final Reckoning without set bonus. But again, it's not like you lose a lot by using Sanctified Wrath. You will lose boss damage. Again, this is for overall damage done. I'll run through it again. With set bonus, at least 2 set. Zeal, Blade, Divine Purpose, Sanctified Wrath. That's going to get you the max damage for an overall on a dungeon, if that matters to you. For non-set, you can go Zeal, Empyrean Power. You can still use Blade of Wrath, but Empyrean Power, Divine Purpose or Seraphim, Sanctified Wrath, or Final Reckoning. And that's largely going to be, am I going to just double down on my single target, or am I going for max damage? And, do I care about, I'm still doing good damage. Do I care about losing possibly 1% or something by running Sanctified Wrath, Divine Purpose without the set bonus, but I also have nothing to manage. I have no extra buttons to press. It comes a very easy class to play. In Mythic Plus, especially with the Encrypted Affix, that's the one that you want to be killing, by the way, as a Ret Paladin. The Encrypted Affix of 9.2, we'll just talk about this for a little bit here. That's the affix. You have you have Woe, you have Vi. For Ret Paladin, for almost everybody, but for Ret Paladin, you really want to be killing unless this gets nerfed heavily or something. That'll give you your wings up and your Divine Toll, Wake of Ashes. Wake of Ashes won't matter once you have your 4 set, but gets everything back off cooldown really quickly. And it just flows really well, Divine Purpose, Sanctified Wrath. Seraphim coming up quicker isn't a bad thing either, or Final Reckoning for that matter. But it's still, it just flows very well. It feels really good. And if you haven't tried it yet, you'll understand what I mean by it feels good, because it's hard to kind of talk about a feeling or explain how a feeling actually works. But it feels really well while also doing, again, max damage if you have the set bonus. So that's talents for you. Let's talk a little bit about legendaries, since I already mentioned legendaries. Can't really, those two things are kind of combined, but let's talk about the best legendaries. The best legendaries for just max damage in a Mythic Plus dungeon as Ret are Tempest of the Lightbringer and Unity. That's, of course, Divine Resonance. This can be a bit of an issue for you, especially if you're don't have the goal just to have a bunch of legendaries everywhere, because your belt is kind of the best place to put your Tempest of the Lightbringer, and that's also the free Unity one that you get, or it could just be where your Divine Resonance is at already. For me, I have Tempest of the Lightbringer on my belt, and I have Unity on my ring, and those are that's just where I have it right now. I'll eventually probably move my Unity at some point, or I might not. And I could eventually move Tempest as well once I have 5 tier pieces that I can switch on and off and stuff. So I always have a 4 set. You can switch those off. That's just where I have mine. But those are going to do the max damage. If you're looking more to bolster your single target, you could really look into using Vanguard's Momentum. This does require you to really be on your ball using your Hammer of Wrath ability properly to keep your damage buff going. But Vanguard's Momentum's good. You can also use Magistrate's Judgment. You could use Dusk of Dawn as well. Those will give you a little bit more versatility with single target versus AoE. But just again, for straight damage, overall damage of a dungeon, which is what most people look at for better or for worse, Tempest of Lightbringer will beat that out. Of course, second with Unity, that's your only choice. And for this, that's Kyrian, so that's the Divine Toll legendary. Let's talk a little bit about Soulbind / Conduits. Pretty simple here for the most part. For the Soulbind, we're going to be going with Forge Light Prime. This is the same as like rating and stuff like that. There is one difference though. For dungeons, in almost every case, if you have a ton of haste, which is possible with the way the gear is right now, if you have like over 30% haste, for example, just throwing a number out there, then this thing I'm about to talk about might not be super useful for you. But you kind of, so let's just start at the top. You do Bronze Call to Action into the Potency. So there I have Ringing Clarity. The 2 potencies you're going to be using are Ringing Clarity and Virtuous Command. Those are ones that you're going to be using either way. Then you can go down whatever, keep going down. And then when you get to the next choice, there's a potency choice, a defensive choice, and a finesse choice. And you have to choose a path. So if you have the 4 set especially, I would say just go down the middle every time for Mythic Plus. If you have a 2 set or a no set, again, it's going to depend on your haste for min-maxing, but you can go down the left side and use Expurg there on the potency side. However, you also don't have to do that. You can also just keep going down the middle. So you take the extra endurance conduit, and then you have this Hammer of Genesis ability. So let's read what this does. Damaging a new enemy, this is a mechanic in WoW that's often used for Mythic Plus, grants you 3% haste for 10 seconds up to 5 stacks. So 15% haste that you can keep stacking up. It only lasts 10 seconds though, so you're not going to be able to chain it pole to pole if you're doing any kind of high key at all. But it's a 15% haste at the start of a pull, and if you have your wings up, for example, that's quite good. However, if you already have 30% haste, and this is what I try to explain to people, and sometimes people don't fully understand this. If you have 10% haste and you gain 15% haste, that is a huge power gain. You're going from 10 to 25% haste. If you have 31% haste as a Ret Paladin and you go to 46% haste, that's not as huge of a gain. It's still a power gain, but it has diminishing returns at a certain point. So that's the only way in which Hammer of Genesis isn't good in Mythic Plus, because basically at the start of every pull, you're getting a nice, huge 10-second buff. And if there's any way that your guys are like pulling something in late, you can extend that buff, which is good as well. Which happens a lot depending on how your tank pulls the dungeon and stuff. You might pull something in slightly later than the rest of it, or a group of 2 into a bigger pack that you pulled earlier and got under control. So Hammer of Genesis is overall probably the best thing to do though. If you're just not sure, you don't know where your haste is, there's no good way to sim it. If you do simulate your character, you can do like a boss sim with like 5 or 6 bosses, because especially during a fortified week, the trash is like all bosses, right? They all have a ton of health, so you can actually simulate like a 2-minute fight, for example, with like 6 boss targets or however much your tank normally pulls. Maybe it's 4, maybe it's 5. You can actually simulate that, and it'll give you a rough estimate on your DPS per pull with that. And maybe your pulls are only a minute 30 or whatever, so then you make it a minute 30 on your simulation instead of 2 minutes. But that is one way you can kind of game it for knowing how much damage, how to maximize each pull of damage, for example. and that's technically a single target sim for some reason, I think. But you just change the number of bosses up to a higher number, and yeah, Hammer Genesis Hammer Genesis is almost always going to be the right call. Though, if you just want the simple answer, you could just run that and be fine. It doesn't help you much on single target, but you already aren't really focusing on single target if you are running like Tempest of the Lightbringer, right? So you're just kind of doubling down on your AoE damage, on your pull damage, on your trash pull damage, and you can just run with that. You also get an extra, defensive conduit as well, which isn't a terrible thing to have in a high Mythic Plus keys too. So the Expurg, and the reason why I said earlier, the 4-set Expurg also loses its value when some of your Blade of Wrath are now Wake of Ashes. So then it's like, well, maybe I use Truth's Wake, which is optional. I mean, you could sim that. So like if you were going to sim something once you had a 4-set, for example, you would sim Truth's Wake versus Hammer of Genesis, right? And see which one performed better for you. It's probably going to be Hammer, I'd imagine, but maybe not. Maybe it's not. I honestly don't know. I don't have my 4-set yet, personally. That would be an interesting thing to sim, though. Like that, since the scenario I set up where it's like 6 boss targets, 4-piece, Truth's Wake versus Hammer of Genesis. That's an interesting thing. This is like kind of like the only interesting thing in here, of where, it's like maybe in some cases one is better than the other. Then we go down the Potency, Virtuous Command, or Ringing Clarity. It doesn't matter what order you have them in. Then you just go down the left side to Soul Glow, Spectrometer, or whatever. Then you have a Defensive Conduit, and then you have the bottom one. So you kind of just go down the left side, except for you go down the center. Well, then there's a center option, and you can grab the Hammer of Genesis. It's really good. Again, diminishing returns, but... And I try to do that, and some people get really mad because some people really, really like Hammer of Genesis, and it's like, I'm not saying it's bad. In fact, in this video, I'm telling you to use it for Mythic Plus. It's just, it does have diminishing returns. That's just a fact. If you have super high haste, it will not sim as well as if you have like 10% haste, right? It's just not. That's just kind of the way it works. As far as trinkets go, trinkets, you can min-max these to death. To be honest, generally speaking, you still want a trinket to pop with your wings on use. You can use multiple on uses in Mythic Plus, that you have one up for each pull. So if you have like a first sigil or whatever from raiding, you could still use that, even though it's a 5-minute cooldown. You could still use that and have a super big, powerful pull every now and then. You can use badge, whether you have sigil or not, and use that for nearly every pull, right? And maybe some pulls more than once. You can use your badge. It won't line up perfectly with being a thing, but you still can use that. The Overwhelming Power Crystal is a really good option. IQD is a decent option. Both of those I think are from the other side dungeon. On uses are really where it's at here. File is an option as well. But yeah, there's certain... It's not that you can't use other trinkets as well. Like, you can still use Old Warrior Soul if you want. It's not the best Mythic Plus trinket. But, trinkets are not as... They're very important in Mythic Plus, actually. But they're not, like, as, like... you can only use this one. Otherwise, all the other ones suck or whatever. There's a lot of options. A lot of the on-use ones are good. And generally, you just want to make sure, if possible, if you could have an on-use trinket up for every time you pop wings, I mean, that would be ideal, of course, for every pull and doing the max damage. So, stats-wise, you're just going to run what you run. It's not a huge deal. Obviously, there is diminishing returns on everything, but it's not... A lot of people like to know, like, what stats should I focus on? What stats should I focus on? Well, technically, haste and mastery are good. You're getting this buff from Genesis Hammer, though, at the beginning of pulls. So, again, you don't have to focus on haste if you're mostly running Mythic Pluses, right? You can put some stuff into crit and verse. Crit has a diminishing turns, usually like around 30%, because, wings is already giving you a boost of power there. So usually you have a diminishing returns on crit after a certain point. And previously, I know it's been like you don't really find the diminishing returns to the end of an expansion, but previously it's been like 30-32%. You start to see some really huge diminishing returns, and it can be even lower than that. But you could just put your stats into whatever. Mastery is always going to be good. Haste is good, and then versus a flat stat. Our stats are pretty even overall. You just want to make sure you're not at. The biggest thing about simming your character actually is just knowing, oh hey, I'm not even close to having enough haste, right? So like haste is worth twice as much as mastery is or something when you sim, and that's when you know you need more haste, right? But generally speaking, it should be within like a tenth or so. If your stats are somewhat balanced, the values of them will be pretty close to each other. That's just a good thing about Ret. It's not like we only stack haste, we only stack mastery. You want a nice healthy balance of stats, frankly. Is there anything else I didn't get to? I did legendaries. No, I think that's about it. Covenant, Kyrian, yep. So yeah, this is my first ever one here. I'm enjoying Mythic Plus a lot. As long as I keep enjoying it, I could do more Mythic Plus videos in the future, and even be more. I can't really know Rep Paladin more, but I can like have more tricks and stuff for people for Mythic Plus, as I, do more and more of them just to do them, just to push score, just to do whatever, instead of just doing them to fill a vault. Hopefully this can help out some people. And yeah, as always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel. Helps me out so much. And other than that, everybody, have a good one.